This year, the leading Republican running for governor is the closest thing to a Trump clone that I've ever seen in your state. You either keep Gavin Newsom as your governor, or you'll get Donald Trump. It's not a joke.
President Joe Biden there saying a clone of Donald Trump is fighting to unseat California Governor Gavin Newsom in today's recall election. So it should come as no surprise that yesterday, said Trump clone Larry Elder's team was already claiming on a website funded by his campaign that fraud had occurred, that it had been discovered in the election results, leading Governor Newsom to a fraudulent victory in Elder's view. The problem is there hasn't been a victory for Newsom yet because Election Day hadn't begun when that website went up. Not a single ballot had been reported yet. So the Larry Elder campaign in the real world might have a hard time explaining how or why they could offer so much detail on how the so-called fraud, which wasn't really fraud, was uncovered in the non-existent results. The website said this, quote, statistical analysis used to detect fraud in elections held in third world nations like Russia, Venezuela, and Iran have detected fraud in California, resulting in Governor Gavin Newsom being reinstated as governor. The primary analytical tool used was Benford's Law and can be readily reproduced. Of course, that didn't happen. That's not real. There's been no evidence of fraud in California, no evidence of widespread fraud in any state, anywhere. No matter what lies, the right-wing politicians continue to tell the American people, perhaps in a bid to save face when they lose, when the disgraced ex-president loses. And the polls are looking very grim for Larry Elder. The three most recent ones show Californians choosing to keep Gavin Newsom as their governor by double-digit margins. It appears Elder, as a result, perhaps, reached swiftly into Donald Trump's playbook, claiming it was rigged to hedge what could turn out to be a sizable loss. Joining our coverage, politics and journalism professor at Morgan State University, Jason Johnson. He's in California, observing and reporting on the recall. And NBC News correspondent Jacob Soboroff, live for us near a polling site in San Francisco. And Jacob, you've got news.
Yeah, hi, Nicole. I can confirm, first of all, what you said, which is not a single ballot has been counted yet in California. Polls don't close until later this evening. And in all seriousness, when I talked to Larry Elder yesterday about this election, whether or not he would accept the results, and he declined, the next question I had is, what would Governor Newsom do in response? Well, now we know. We've had the opportunity to catch up with Governor Newsom up here in San Francisco. He traveled from down south in Southern California up here earlier this morning. And I spoke to him about what Larry Elder said and what he would do in response. Here's his answer. I spoke to Larry Elder yesterday, and he refused to commit to accepting the results of the election. I'm curious if you heard what he had to say. What do you make of that? And obviously,
I'll take my mask off on that one. I mean, just think about what you just said to me. Donald Trump putting out something for the second time. What that message sends to the United States, people all across this country, the vote somehow doesn't matter, that its whole thing is rigged. I mean, they are quite literally trying to dismantle democracy and trust in this country and our very nation. I mean, this is fundamental. This is serious stuff. I hope people are paying attention to this. Look, I could care less what he does at the election. I'll accept the will of the voters no matter what it is. Period, full stop. The idea they're even playing around with this and vandalizing trust and confidence, that's consequential, and it has real impact across this country. And I'll tell you what, the irony of it, and it really is the irony, it's going to hurt the Republican Party because they're telling their voters their vote doesn't even matter. So it's a hell of a thing. And I hope people are waking up to what's going on in this country. This is a serious moment in this nation. What's happening all across this country, we've got to push back. And that's why in California, we need to send a powerful message. Hell no to these recalls and the cynicism and Trumpism and everything that's going on with voter suppression, attacking women's rights. This is a fundamental moment in American history.
Nicole, Governor Newsom saying that the Republicans are trying to dismantle democracy and that he will accept the results of the election, win or lose, full stop. A very different message than we heard from Larry Elder yesterday.
I mean, Jacob, is there any example where a Republican in the state who's ahead has ever flirted with the dismantling of democracy?
No, off the top of my head, no. There'll be historians of California who I'm sure will tweet me after this. But the idea of it, the only place I've seen it from personal experience is last November in Las Vegas, Nevada, when I chased Rick Grinnell, Matt Schlapp, and Adam Laxalt into a waiting van to be spirited away after they presented without evidence claims of voter fraud in Nevada. You know, to go back to what you and I talked about yesterday, this is straight out of the Donald Trump playbook, and you heard the governor refer to that as well. Is there a Republican icon in California that's done this? I don't believe so. Clearly, there is one in national Republican politics, the former president of the United States.
No, I mean, look, you're right. I worked for Dan Lundgren, who was behind, who never questioned the election results. I came up in politics in California working for Republicans who faced long odds, and not a single one of them ever debased the state's voters. They never debased democracy itself. They were not sore losers. They were real men. And I wonder, Jason Johnson, if you can speak to the lack of masculinity in these male Republican candidates who can't take a punch politically. They can't win on the merits. They're too weak and unpopular. So they cry foul, they cry rigged. It really goes counter to all the other bogus machismo coming out of the sort of sickest, most toxic elements of the political right.
It's interesting. You know, masculinity continues to be defined down, up, right, and left, depending on what works for Republicans, right? Like when they're attacking women, they're being masculine, but when they're trying to control women, they're being masculine. When they lose, they say that they've been cheated and they cry, but when they win, they still say that they're victims. I don't know what these guys are trying to do. And quite frankly, Nicole, that is the single main reason. If Gavin Newsom ends up winning this recall, it will be the sort of toxic behavior of Republican men that has been the main reason why. This race was right at the razor's edge until about 3 weeks ago, when it became less about a referendum on Gavin Newsom and more about a choice between Larry Elder, who's basically Trumpism and blackface, versus Gavin Newsom, who's at least a competent politician. And once people started to compare the two, and once they heard about the sexist, racist, ridiculous things that have come out of Larry Elder's mouth, it became a lot easier for people to say, you know what, we're going to stick it out with Gavin Newsom. If we have a problem with him, we can work it out in a functional election next year. But
Jason, to speak to what the governor's saying there, I mean, a really fiery response to Jacob's question about pay attention. I mean, this is the first big election after the November election, and it's clear that debasing the vote, debasing the voters, which is what it is to not accept a result, is not just a playbook. That's not putting it strongly enough. It is Republican dogma. This is how they will lose from now on.
Well, and Nicole, the key is, and you can say this is the epitome of this, actually, you can see with Larry Elder, because remember, initially in an early interview during this recall election, Larry Elder said, of course Joe Biden was elected president. Then he got on right-wing radio and completely switched his tune 48 hours later. They don't even believe in dismantling a system. What their core message of the Republican Party is, and whether it's in California or whether it's in Texas or whether it's in Georgia, has now become Democrats are inherently illegitimate participants in democracy. So democracy doesn't count if anybody wins other than a Republican. Now, fortunately, in a state like California, there's not enough Republicans who believe that to probably get away with it. But that same attitude leads to the big lie in Texas. That same attitude leads to the voter suppression we're seeing in Florida, the voter suppression that we're seeing in Georgia. It's this idea that they don't even want to pretend to compete anymore. The coalition of black, brown, tan, queer women in this world who decided that they didn't want Donald Trump and authoritarianism, white nationalism in the White House anymore are no longer legitimate participants in democracy, according to most Republicans. And maybe it gets defeated here, but it hasn't been defeated across the country yet.
Jacob, I'll give you the last word. What are you watching for tonight?
Number one, obviously, turnout, Nicole, but also how people react, how the governor reacts going forward. He actually extended an olive branch to the folks on the other side of this recall. Remember, there were 1.7 million people who signed that petition to recall the governor of California. And there are very serious issues that do need to be dealt with. Larry Elder has effectively moved the conversation away from many issues that matter to California voters, whether it's homelessness. There are people sleeping on the street. I'm talking to you from right now in San Francisco. COVID hit the state particularly hard. Economic inequality is worse here than any state in the union. But Larry Elder and the Republicans made this about voter fraud and not accepting the results of the election. Where do we go from here tonight after Governor Newsom is able to stay in office? At least that's what his campaign believes is going to happen tonight. And there are a lot of serious issues on the table out here in California to look at.
We're glad that you're on this for us. NBC's Jacob Soboroff live for us in San Francisco. Thank you so much. Jason's sticking around.